All right. Wow. This is so interesting. I'm usually the person on the back end of this, helping everybody else out and giving them a pep talk before we go live. But here we are. I'm the person who's live now. Hey, everybody. Um, so my name is Reid Foster. Welcome to the Music Business Club Happy Hour. I've got my. This is not a Sugar Shack beer, actually. This is a local beer from Three Notch Brewery called the Ghost Pale Ale, my current favorite local beer. Just got a text from Igor saying it sounds great so far. Thank God. And cheers, everybody. Okay. Oh, wow. People are here already. Sweet. Well, so I guess I'll start out just a little bit by giving you a little bit of a background about me. I started out in the music industry the way lots of people did, by playing music. I started playing the violin in third grade. Started playing the piano in the fourth grade, and basically continued through like high school age. Around the end of high school, my piano teacher started asking me to take on students of hers. So I was teaching little kids like musical note bingo and stuff, and Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And around that same time, I started working in a drum shop, a place called Skips Music in Sacramento. Independent retailer. Many of the things that became part of my life go back to Skips Music, some of my best friends. And working in the drum shop, a guy named Rich Shepard, longtime friend and mentor of mine, came upstairs to the drum shop one day and said, "Hey, dude, I'm going to start a band. Do you want to be the drummer?" I was like, "Yeah, but you got to teach me how to play the drums." And play the drums. And thus it began. And I kind of learned as I went. Rich had like tinnitus, so he taught me how to play with brushes. So it was always kind of like about playing as quiet as we could. And like we eventually started playing in coffee shops and stuff. And after a year or two, I was like having some friends over at my house one day. And this other buddy of mine named Chris was like, "Hey, let's start a band." I was like, "All right." And we did. And that band ended up touring around the country for like the better part of my 20s. 2002-ish to 2010. That was where I, really got into the business of music. I was kind of just the guy who kept a calendar and like started calling every band in town or every bar in town and saying, "How can I book a show at your bar?" And it's like, "Well, you got to write a bio." "All right, cool. You got to have a MySpace page." "Great. You need a website." "Cool." So I taught myself HTML with, I think I even had like an HTML for Dummies book. It's not on the shelf there anymore, but it was all just learning as you go. And I think that's the way everybody kind of has to do it. Eventually booking tours for my own band led to friends asking me to book shows for their bands. And, then a friend asked me to be her publicist for a tour. And it's like, all right, I guess I'll write a press release and send it out to media. And, at some point in that process, somebody told me that anytime an email comes through with the subject line, "for immediate release," that they read that as "for immediate delete." And that was one of my first indicators that you can't really be cookie cutter with stuff and that you need to be a little bit more creative. And just because something works in this situation doesn't mean it's going to work in that situation. My own band ran its course, and I went on a little bit of a soul searching journey and went and spent some time on a permaculture farm in Costa Rica, a place called Punta Mona, which is super cool. And a buddy of mine came down there with me. And this was a buddy who also managed a band back in the day. And my band used to book shows with his band. And, you know, we would end up late night at each other's houses, you know, drinking beers and just shooting the shit. And he like tagged along with me to Costa Rica. And the band that he was managing had started to like kind of fizzle out, and my band had just broken up, and had just gotten out of a serious relationship, and really was like trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And we found ourselves sitting in the middle of a jungle, still talking about bands and shows that we wanted to book. And that was, you know, one of my indicators. It's like, oh man, this is obviously what I'm interested in. I better figure out how to make a career out of this. By the time I left Costa Rica, after a couple of months, I decided I wanted to travel around Southeast Asia because it was like a life goal, and I was in my late 20s at the time. And by the time I finished my trip in Southeast Asia, I decided that I wanted to go spend a year in New Zealand. A friend of mine had done it before and had told me about this program where you could basically get just a carte blanche work visa and go to New Zealand and work. And the only condition was that you had to arrive in New Zealand by the time you turned 30. And I think I was just about to turn 29 at the time. And so I went. I got to New Zealand and didn't know a soul in the country. But I had like my Lonely Planet. I'm looking up on the shelf at the Lonely Planet right now. I knew that when I got there, I wanted to focus on being in the music industry. Well, the entertainment industry. I was open to trying to be a promoter or a booking agent or a publicist or work for a radio station or a newspaper or whatever. And I got there and just hit the ground running and just started like, you know, resume, cold contact. And I think the fact that I just didn't know anybody kind of removed some distractions. I literally just sat there all day long trying to figure out how I could try and get a job with anybody in the industry. In that process, I was also like, you know, pretty broke. So I was checking out like community message boards about cheap things to do around town. And I subscribed to this weekly email list of free and cheap things to do in Wellington, New Zealand. And I decided that I would just respond to that email and say, hey, I don't know if anybody's actually reading this, but if you are, this is who I am. This is what I'm interested in. I'd love to meet you sometime. And this woman, her name was Hillary Carmody, and she was actually a stand-up comedian. So the fact that her last name was Carmody and like her first name was Hillary, but it was kind of like hilarious comedy. But anyway, she was a real person. And a few weeks after that, she sent me an email and she's like, hey, I don't know if this is something you'd be interested in, but I saw this, you know, like their equivalent of Craigslist. I saw this ad for a barely paid internship with a music management company. And I thought of you. And I was like, awesome, great. And I looked them up and they managed a couple of different bands. And one of them I thought maybe I'd heard of before, but I wasn't sure. And it turned out that their office was like 2 blocks from my house. So I applied for it and went and interviewed. The band that I thought I had heard of before was called the Black Seeds. You know, like turns out they're like an institution in New Zealand reggae, and they're like one of the sickest live bands in the country. So that was just lucky. And they hired me, and it was part-time and barely paid. And it was just 2 guys. One of the guys was like the original Black Seeds manager. They also managed a band called the Phoenix Foundation, not a reggae band, more of like an indie rock band. Amazing, amazing, amazing musicians. But the original guy was living in London at the time, and his like right-hand man who would eventually just kind of become his business partner was the guy that I was working with every day. His name's Craig Pierce. Craig, if you're watching, so much love, man. And also Matt McLeod, the original manager. Those guys really took me under their wing. And one day I was like, Craig, how did you like get to be Matt's partner? How did you go from being like the assistant to the partner? And he's like, well, I basically just started showing up every day and like working. And eventually I was just here all the time and really helping him out. And it just made sense. And that was another moment that's like, right, just work your ass off, make yourself available, be reliable, become indispensable, and eventually it might turn into a job. And my sort of barely paid internship bore fruit. You know, they ended up taking on another band and asking me to kind of be the point person for it. That brought me to Europe to tour with them. I did some tour managing with them in Europe and in New Zealand. I did merchandise for the Black Seeds on a couple of their big tours. And like, it was really the first time I had ever worked with bands that played in front of like massive, massive crowds. It was like the first time I had really been to a festival and seen what it was like on the other side for like real bands and like bus parking and catering and like seeing a band walk out onto a stage and like thousands of people go nuts. It was like so cool. So I lived in New Zealand for a year, worked with those guys. And along the way, it was the year the Black Seeds were releasing their 2012 album, Dust and Dirt. They had a US label, Easy Star Records, and a US manager, a guy named Seth Herman, who was the founder of Rootfire. And I got to know those guys, helping them put together the US tour for the Black Seeds. Fast forward to the end of my year there, I ended up actually getting to go represent the New Zealand music industry at this conference in Greece, which was like crazy. New Zealand actually offers grant funding for the arts. So like if you're a band, you can apply for like a $8,000 grant to record a music video, or a $10,000 to $20,000 grant to record your album and tour the country, or a $100,000 grant to record your album and tour the country and tour in other continents. And we got this email one day that said, hey, apply for this $5,000 grant to go to the Womex Music Conference in Greece on behalf of the New Zealand music industry. And I forwarded it to Matt and Craig, and they're like, you should just apply. So I did. And I got accepted. So I'm this American guy who had been living in New Zealand for a year and flew to Europe and did a tour with the Black Seeds, did a tour with this other band called Lawrence Arabia. And then I just stayed in Europe and went to this conference. And, you know, this whole year of my life was just kind of like, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. And, you know, by the time all that was done, I felt like I had a much, much better understanding of like how it all kind of works. I moved back to the United States and decided I wanted to live in New York. One of my best friends had a room there. And it was like, that's where I'm going to go. That's where I'm going to network. That's where I'm going to meet everybody. That's where it's going to happen. And I went there, and some of that happened, but after a year and a half or so, it was like not happening as quickly. And I was serving tables and stuff to pay my bills at the same time, and starting to think that like, you know, maybe New York isn't where it's going to happen for me, because it's fucking expensive and it's hard. And I'm not out meeting the people and networking because I'm kind of broke, and it takes forever to get from, you know, one place to the next. And, it was just a grind, and it was proving not to be kind of like the paradise that I thought it might be. And around that time, I got a phone call from Seth Herman. He had changed his phone number. I didn't know it was him calling me. We hadn't spoken in about 6 months. And it's like, hello, this is Reid. He's like, hey, man, it's Seth. Oh, what's up, dude? And we spent half an hour, 45 minutes talking, catching up. And finally he goes, hey, so I was Skyping with the guys in New Zealand yesterday, and your name came up, and they were just saying how much they enjoyed working with you. And I was, oh, Matty Plumsky from Wellington. What's up, dude? They were saying how much they enjoyed working with you, and I was just thinking it would be cool if we could find a way to work together someday too. And I was like, oh, awesome. I've got my own thing, not really trying to stop doing that. But I'm all ears anytime, if there's ever a way we could collaborate, I would love that. I'm all ears. And he's like, cool, well, I've got this crazy idea. There's a train that leaves Penn Station today at 3:30. And if you wanted to come down to Charlottesville this weekend, Charlottesville, Virginia, where I now live, if you wanted to come down to Charlottesville this weekend and hang out, I could pay for your ticket. Like my business partner, Curtis, is going to be here. And there's this other guy from South Carolina who we think we might start working with, and he's going to come up. And my wife and I just bought a house, and she's out of town for the weekend. So we're just going to kind of like barbecue and hang out and talk about the music business. And if you want to come, I can buy your ticket right now. I just need to know that you can come. And it's like, whoa. Yeah, I mean, I think I should do that. And I had to like call the bar that I worked at and tell my manager that I really felt like I should jump on a train at 3:30 today instead of coming into work. And she was like, fucking do it. So I did. I barely made it to the train. Got on the train at Penn Station. It was a 6-hour ride down to Charlottesville. I am pulling into Amtrak, and I text Seth and Curtis, and I'm like, hey guys, just arriving. And they text back and they're like, hey, we're putting out a fire right now. It's going to take us a little bit longer, but walk up the stairs from the train station and look for a neon sign that says, get in here and order a margarita. And they're the best margaritas in town, and we'll be there as soon as we can. Okay, great. I did that, sat down at the bar, ordered a margarita, ordered some chips and salsa because I was totally starving. I did not think the margarita was the best margarita in town because it was like an off day that day. And I was like scarfing the chips, but I knew they were coming for dinner, so I was saving some room. And when I finished the margarita, I switched to a Corona. And right around that time, Seth and Curtis walk in. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Let me close up my tab here, and I'll go eat dinner with my friends. And the bartender gave me my bill, and it was $11. And it's like, $11? Because in New York, the margarita alone would have been, 15 or something. And that was kind of like the first thing. It was like, whoa, it's like really affordable here. And we got dinner. We ended up going on a hike the next day. At the time, I was working with this sort of jamgrass band, and I had been emailing with their manager. I'd never met the guy, but Seth had seen me post something about the infamous String Dusters. That was the band whose manager I had been emailing. And Seth was like, oh, I saw you post about the String Dusters. Their manager is a buddy. We could go over to his place and have some beers if you want. I'm just like, really? Like, we could? I would love to. And we go over to my friend Michael's house. He has become my friend. And we have some beers. We sit there and we talk about the shop. And within about 24 hours of me getting to Charlottesville, all of a sudden the light bulb kind of went off, and it was just like, this place has an insane concentration of music industry people. It's a lot cheaper than New York. It feels really good. Maybe I should just move here. And I even like had that thought out loud with like talking with Seth one day. It's like, what if I just moved here? And a couple months later I did. And there was no arrangement. You know, I had not started working for Rootfire or anything at that point. I just knew that I had a gut feeling that if I moved down to Charlottesville, I might be able to find what I had been looking for in New York, which was an opportunity to build my career and grow. And I moved down a couple months later, and by the time I got there, Seth was like, hey, I've got an idea for how we could actually work together. We just started managing this band called The Movement. They've got a headline tour coming up in a couple months, and we need to book all the opening bands. Would you want to do that? It's like, sure. So I started picking up the phone, looking at emails, researching these bands. You know, Seth had been saving all of these incoming inquiries, and he just sent them all to me, and I just picked it up and started booking the bands. I see a comment from Treehouse. Treehouse was one of the bands that we booked, I'm sure, in Raleigh or Charleston or Charlotte or something. Had a call with who's a guy who's become a friend since, a guy named Robbie Boggs, who had been working with The Movement for a while. And he was like, oh man, there's, all these bands. There's Sun-Dried Vibes, there's Fear Nothing Band, there's Treehouse, there's, he just kind of went on and like kind of gave me a very early schooling in like all of the bands that were on his radar. And I had worked with the Black Seeds in New Zealand, and they're definitely like a reggae funk jam band. But I had not really worked with reggae bands in the United States before. I had worked with like folk bands and bluegrass bands and funk bands and stuff. So I kind of just like dove headfirst into the American reggae scene. And within a couple weeks of starting that, Seth was like, hey, do you want to just be the day-to-day manager? Like, I feel like you could handle this stuff. And I'm like, well, crazy. And then like a week or two later, he's like, hey, they need a tour manager too. Could you go on the road? I'm like, shit. All right. And I did. And I remember that very first tour, Jay Smiles, the bassist, and Brenton, the merch guy at the time, Brenton Delman, B-Dot, they drove down to Charlottesville and they picked me up, and we drove down to Charleston. And it was the first day of my first tour with The Movement. We got to Josh Swain's house and, packed up the trailer. Gary met us there, I think. We get in the van and we start driving to Boone. And about 10 minutes into the ride, we're still in, we were in Columbia, South Carolina. We're still in Columbia. And we get pulled over. I'm driving. We get pulled over right there, 10 minutes into the first tour. And the cops proceeded to rip the van apart for the next hour and a half or so. They said that we were randomly pulled over as part of their highway interdiction program. And they brought dogs out. And while the dog is like searching the van, they're joking to us about how they can make the dog we can make him smell whatever we need him to, just to get our warrant and stuff. And they tore the van apart. Somebody had like some small amount of weed and got like a $350 ticket. And they let us on our way. That was my first day of the first tour with The Movement ever. I spent the next 3 years, I think, tour managing the band. And in that time, Seth transitioned, was starting to transition out of management, and I had just kind of taken over managing the band altogether. By that point, I had also taken over managing Giant Panda Gorilla Dub Squad from Seth. I'd been helping him, and then as he was kind of getting out of it, things transitioned over to me. And at some point over the next year, sort of end of 2016, early 2017, Seth was getting ready to start a family and thinking about what the next chapter was going to be, and asked me if I would be the general manager of Rootfire and just, kind of treat it like any other, like a band, except it wasn't exactly a band. It was this kind of like multifaceted thing that in theory, you could manage just like a band. So I started doing that. And here we are a few years later, and I'm overseeing the whole thing now. And it's a little bit nuts to look back on it all and think of how I never could have fathomed how the path would go. It's only kind of looking backwards that that I can see what the path was. So the moral of the story is there's not really a quick way to do it. And anybody who's interested and motivated to work in the music business, roll up your sleeves and start grinding, start making friends, be reliable. And, you know, it'll probably work, but it'll take a really long time. And you might be really, really broke along the way. But if you stick with it and you follow up and you try to do good work and you're an honest person, you know, eventually it could start adding up. As Ryan Owen says, just say yes. Okay, I've been rambling on here for 26 minutes and I see all sorts of comments coming in. There was a question that came in earlier from Thomas Simonko, who Thomas was a Richmond guy. He and I got a couple beers in Charlottesville a couple years ago because he reached out. We never really did get an opportunity to work together, but Thomas, if you're watching right now, it's been great to be acquainted with you. And I look forward to working with you in some capacity at some point. But your question was, do you foresee any major changes to the entertainment gig industry after COVID? If so, what do you think they may be? I definitely see changes in the industry, but not necessarily like this or that. You know, the changes that I see are kind of what's happening right before our eyes right now. Unfortunately, there is, you know, some Darwinism going on where there are some entities, some individuals, some businesses who were struggling before, and the inability to make money touring is basically going to mean that they have to figure out something else to pay their bills. And by the time touring can come back again, it's very possible that those people will have just realized that whatever they started doing to fill the gap is actually more reliable and the better idea for them. So I think the changes that are really going to happen is that the people and the companies who 2 months ago were doing, you know, what they do will probably be different than the people and the companies in some cases who kind of like are on the other side. I think right now innovation is, you know, we are ripe for innovation right now. Anybody who has read any of the Rootfire emails that I've written recently have probably noticed that as a theme. They say necessity is the mother of invention. You know, this is when the creative people who have been grinding and making the industry happen all along are having to say, damn, now that touring is not happening, I've got all this energy, I've got to put it into something that can help myself and help everybody. And I think there are going to be some new tools that don't exist right now that probably will exist in 6 months. I think one of the silver linings is that a lot of artists have never really wrapped their head around like the live streaming possibilities. And now that that's really the only way to have an event, people are figuring it out. You know, all the Rootfire TV stuff we've been doing, maybe half of the artists that we've done this, probably more, have never gone live on YouTube or Facebook or anything. So just like walking them through the steps of how to use the tools that are already available to them is really cool. And I think the artists who are ready to hustle and ready to grind are still ready to hustle and ready to grind. And now is when you need to get really creative about figuring out what types of things you can do to move your business along. So Thomas, to answer your question, I think a lot of things will change, but it's hard to put my finger on exactly what they will be. But if I had to say anything, I think it's that there will be new players 6 months from now, a year from now, and some of the old players probably will have gotten out of the game. So There's one question down. Let's see. Let me go up to the top here. Try and not miss anybody. Oh man, I've got so many friends watching right now. That's so cool. Actually, real quick, I need to give a shout out to a couple of people. Gray O'Neill and Evan Button. Gray has been my right-hand man here in Charlottesville for the last year and a half or so. It is incredible when you've got people working with you who really, really can grind. And Gray has been in the trenches with me every day. And Gray, I'm so thankful for you. And Evan Button. Evan, man, Evan is the Rootfire intern. His internship just ended because he got a real job. Good for you. And I wish that we were in a position to hire him full time, because anybody who hires Evan Button is going to be lucky. Evan and Gray, when the COVID stuff hit and we made a hard turn into the live streaming stuff, those guys were working 7 days a week with me. You know, we were like streaming at 9 p.m. on a Sunday and 9 a.m. on a Monday and every time in between. And those guys really, really, really helped build the system that has made us able to do all these live streams. So without those guys, none of this stuff would have been able to happen. Abel Cooper, also Ineffable West Coast, has been really, really helpful in coordinating a bunch of live streams. Abel works with Igor and the rest of the West Coast office, doing all sorts of stuff every day. Total warrior, and I am really thankful for that. Another shout out to Adam Gross. Adam is the VP of Ineffable Records. Adam is the person who spearheaded the Cali Roots Rhythm project. Adam is largely responsible for a lot of the success that my own artists and other Ineffable and Rootfire artists are seeing on the recording and streaming side right now. Again, another one of these guys who, you know, if it's 11 p.m. and something needs to be done, it needs to be done. And, you know, that's something that a lot of people who work in sort of like the real world can't really wrap their head around. But in the music industry, a lot of times, no matter how much you prepare, shit is time sensitive. And like, sometimes you got to be able to like stop and turn on a dime and like go really hard to get something done in time for this to happen. And Adam is one of those guys who's been really, really going hard. So a couple shout outs to you guys. Thank you so much. Let's see, what other kinds of questions do we have here? Tim Egan, we've never met in person, but I've seen you supporting and tuning into all of these live streams. Thank you so much. Bernie Gonzalez, another dude, hardcore supporter of the scene. I can't count the number of shows I've seen Bernie at. Jeremy Johnson down in Florida. I mean, if it wasn't for Jeremy's generosity, I mean, Jeremy has literally saved me like thousands and thousands of dollars in like storage fees and accommodation fees, putting us up during Reggae Rise Up Florida. So huge thanks to you, Jeremy, for everything you do. All right, cool. Let's see. Mike Middleton can't tune in now. Just wanted to pop in and say we appreciate you. Dano Rankin, what's up? Dano in Tacoma. I don't know how many shows we've booked together over the years, but we finally had a chance to meet at Jazz Bones in Tacoma a few years ago at the Movement. It's great. Tim Azarano, another huge supporter of the scene. What's up, Duderman? Elovaters. Brendan Clement. Dude, huge respect to you and the journey that you've taken and the positive attitude you've always had. You just put out a banger of a tune. You're one of those people who I think have really shined a light on the possibilities of having a positive attitude and working really hard. So I'm really happy to see the success that you're having right now. Duderman, piece of advice, be irreplaceable. Totally, that's worth popping up on the screen here. Duderman, another grinder. Love you, man. Let's see, Carolyn from SoCal Street Team. Kara's been huge in helping us spread the word about Rootfire TV sessions. she's put together an amazing network of street teamers who we've used for all sorts of tours over the years. Let's see, Maddie Plumsky from Wellington, man. I wish we could be hanging out in person, man. Let's see, what do we have here? Michael Allenby, there you are. What's up, dude? Tim Azarano says ease. Cool. Let's see. Jay Shrub, what's up, man? Dustin Dirt is stellar. Man, a lot of good people. John Michaels. You and I have met in person, but we're always like in the middle of a festival and things. You've been a huge supporter of Rootfire in recent years, and I really appreciate it, man. Let's see. Duderman, did you tour manage the movement when they played the Chili Pepper Club in Cocoa Beach, Florida? I did not. Sadly, that was before my time. I've heard the legends from you and them. I wish I could have been there. Let's see. I'm just seeing Ryan Owens' comment. Just say yes. Let's see. Justin Pietro, Dub Architect, Soundwave Consulting. Awesome to see what you've done with digital marketing in this space. If anybody doesn't know, Justin Pietro is the head of Soundwave Consulting. They do a great work with like Cali Roots Festival, Reggae Rise Up, a bunch of artists. I don't even know all the artists they work with, but they do great work. Let's see. Here's a question from Hal Archer. Any international market expansion plans on the horizon for your bands? Absolutely. Let me drink to that, actually. So, international market expansion on the horizon. I think it's every band's dream to like play music in another country. It's really hard to do depending on like what the hurdles are for you. We have, and I guess when I say we, I'm just kind of like talking about myself and all the bands that I've worked with. We've taken a couple of swings at, like finding an international booking agent, getting booked on these festivals. And it's been really interesting. You know, there are a lot of bands in the American reggae scene who are really touring on that kind of like 500 capacity club level, 500 to 1,000 club level, who have been able to go over to Europe and just have an amazing time touring with varying degrees of success. Because I don't work for any of them, I don't know what how much it cost them or how much they made or lost or anything. But bands like Pacifier, New Kingston, even Stick Figure did their first European tour a couple of years ago with Raging Fire, I believe, and they've been able to go back and have just have huge success. So one of the things that I've found with trying to make international stuff happen is it's very rare to find somebody who's just going to take a flyer and, meaning like take a long shot and just fund your trip and hope that they can make their money back. If you can find a booking agent or a promoter who's willing to do that, absolutely do it. You got to be willing to go there and not expect to make as much money as you might make here, because you're starting at a much lower level the first time you ever play an international market. But one of the things we've started doing is really start doing some very early groundwork to make sure that a band has awareness in a market. Things like digital advertising, YouTube ads. YouTube is the biggest streaming service in the world. Something like 90% of people who watch a band's video are not subscribed to their channel. That's one of the best things about YouTube, is that you don't need to have an account to consume the content. So we've started putting a lot of attention into thinking about ways that we can strategically run some ad campaigns to kind of like prime the audience a little bit, and make sure that the band actually does have fans in an international market before you go over there and just kind of take a shot. You want to, if possible, stack the deck in your favor as much as possible. And things like YouTube advertising can really make a difference in that, I think. So Hal, to answer your questions, any international market expansion plans on the horizon? Fuck yeah, to be continued. Let's see. Brendan, this is a great question. Have you made any mistakes along the way that taught you a valuable lesson? More than I could possibly count. I should have anticipated that question beforehand. You know, there's some old quote about that failure is the key to success. And, you know, maybe that's true sometimes, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true other times. But yeah, I've made more mistakes than I can count. And I think that the key there is learn from them and apologize if you need to. If you really fucked somebody's operation up, recognize it, own it, and put your head down and keep moving. But yeah, I mean, if you don't make mistakes, you're probably not trying anything new. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Try not to, but understand that it's just going to be part of the experience and part of your learning, and get better from them. And Brendan, if I can think of specific mistakes, I'll certainly share them if they're appropriate. Let's see. Are there any new up-and-coming bands that you and Rootfire are looking to promote? Absolutely. One of the things that the COVID thing changed is we were actually, a lot of you may have seen that we put out a call for artist submissions a couple of months ago. And we were really, we were getting ready to choose the next Rootfire cooperative artist and then unroll a community choice program where we have you guys help us choose what the next projects are going to be. So there were like 120 something artist submissions. So many talented bands. But some, just, you know, off the top of my head, some new up and coming bands that that I've been enjoying recently. Truth is, a lot of them aren't new. They just haven't been heard of yet. But there's a band called Earthcry out of Jamaica. There's a band called Indubious that we just had on support with the movement earlier in the year, last year. Four Piece Band from Guam. We released their album on Rootfire Cooperative in 2018. Those guys have done a little bit of regrouping since then and are killer musicians. Article Sound System out of Florida. I finally got a chance to see them live for the first time at Arizona Roots at the end of February. Amazing band. Let's see other bands. I'll think of them. But there are so many young up and coming bands who are super talented and are ready to grow. And I'm really excited to see that unfold. Maddie Plumsky, COVID notwithstanding, any plans to visit New Zealand again in the future? Yes, I was tentatively planning to go in January, actually. But before we were able to book those tickets, COVID happened. So New Zealand is in my sights again, and you will be one of the first to know, man. I look forward to seeing you again. Oh, wow, all these comments just jumped ahead. Let's see. Scooby, what's up, Scooby? Hey, by the way, I got your email back about those pins. All good. Thank you, man. When is it going to be possible to get a full band set with bands like The Movement having members living in different states? That's a question we are really trying to figure out right now. You know, all those guys do live in different states, and it makes it challenging to start and end a tour. It makes it more expensive to start and end a tour. That's, you know, the same basic reason that if a band, you know, say you want to book a band for a private party, it's going to be a hell of a lot more expensive than if they're already on tour. If it's a one-off, you got to pay for flights both ways, and there's only one show to make that money back. If it's a tour, you pay for flights at the beginning and you pay for flights at the end, so the expenses are spread out over the course of many shows where you have lots of opportunities to make money. So it's going to be tricky to get a band like The Movement to do a live set without actually flying them to some specific location and having them all be in the same place. I think that probably will happen at some point in the next couple of months, and we are actively trying to figure out how that's going to happen. Let's see. All right. Les Wilson Jr. took me like 3 years till I could meet Reid in person. What's up, Les? It was, I think we finally met at the Broadberry, or was it the outdoor spot in Richmond? I can't quite remember, but good to see you here, man. Oh, we saw each other at Red Rocks too. Let's see. Brenda Andrews. Do the bands feel a part of something huge right now? I feel like there is a huge tick of reggae in the reggae families right now. What I'm meaning is a Woodstock type moment. I'm so blessed to be experiencing something that I'll be able to brag to my grandkids about. Brenda, that's a great reflection, and I agree. I think even before COVID was happening, we were all starting to feel some real traction in the scene of modern reggae in America and abroad. So, and to answer your question, do the bands know and feel part of something huge? I think absolutely. I think there are a lot of bands who have been grinding for a long time and are finally starting to see some success, be able to like maybe pay their rent and support themselves without scraping the bottom of the barrel. And most of that is because they've been grinding and they've been working, and they have been leaning into the same community that has been giving to them. And I think that's a huge thing right now. It's a huge thing for me personally is, and one of my huge goals with Rootfire on the highest level is to really nurture a community that you are a part of, that the bands are a part of, that our friends at Law Records. What's up, Paul and Yasad? Lizzie Hannis, I see a comment from you here. Les, you guys are all part of this community, and I think everybody who is really actively involved here totally feels huge growth right now, and it's pretty exciting. And the COVID stuff is forcing everybody to press pause and get creative, like I was talking about before. But I think that when this is behind us, the community is going to be stronger than ever, and I think we're going to have some insane years of touring ahead. There is so much music being made right now. It's incredible. The bands that I've been working with are very actively making music. I'm hearing mixes every week or so. There's some new piece of music, and it's super exciting. So when that music gets released, everybody is going to be ready to tour and play it. So I think that the best is yet to come for sure. Let's see, man, I'm way behind on the comments here. Let's see. Why don't we jump down and see what else there is? Renee Marie, hey Reid, give a shout out to Backstage Music Lessons. They're doing awesome things right now. Renee, they absolutely are. Huge respect to Kevin Offitzer for having that vision and for getting it off the ground. It's been so cool to see what started as a way to, give some drum lessons on tour has really turned into not just Kevin's thing, but so many artists in the scene. Just yesterday, Zeb from Tribal Seeds did a backstage music lesson that Rootfire helped promote. It's so much more than teach me how to play your instrument. It's really like giving artists and fans some one-on-one time to just be themselves and have a conversation. And I think that's actually been one of the really cool things to see from it is like, it's not just about learning a new trick on your instrument. It's like, getting to hang out with the musicians you love and like having a one-on-one opportunity to talk with them and ask them a question. And maybe you don't even really care about learning the instrument. You just want to be able to hang out with somebody who you've been listening to, who's been inspiring you. And that's special in and of itself. So let's see. Brett Coleman, how do you decide where to start a tour? It depends on the tour, and it depends on the band. If a band all lives in the same place, it would make sense to start a tour close to home and go and work your way around, and then kind of do a big loop and come back. But for a band, say like the Movement, who doesn't all live in the same place, that's where we have to get a lot more strategic and think about like what markets make sense to, like what markets should we hit right now. As you grow and play more shows, everybody eventually learns the same lesson the hard way, which is you can't play the same town over and over and over again and expect to see the same amount of tickets sold every time. Overplaying the market is what we call it. I learned that the hard way back in the day in Sacramento. So anyway, you need to think about what market it makes sense to hit. So like, let's say you did a tour 3 months ago that hit Philly, Virginia Beach, DC, Boston, Chicago, and Nashville. Well, if it's only been 3 months, you probably need to not go back to those markets yet. Unless you're in the very, very, very developmental phases. And there's an argument to be made that it's kind of impossible to overplay a market when you're just getting started, because you're new and you're hopefully like having some people excited about you. And if they see you and they know that you're playing, an hour away next weekend, they'll probably travel and see you. But once a band gets out of those very, very early phases, you got to start thinking strategically about where it makes sense to play. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of times it doesn't make sense to tour if you're just starting out. If you want the experience of like getting your road legs, getting your feet wet, having the adventure of going, and I certainly did that when I was getting started, sleeping on floors, playing in bars, making, $13 or playing for dinner and drinks, or, I've even had to like pay to play in places back in the day. If you just want the experience of like having the adventure and knowing what it's like to live on the road, start a tour wherever you can book a show, and have the next date be wherever you can book a show next. And very quickly you start realizing that you got to look at a map and see how far this town is from that town, to make sure it's humanly possible to drive that far. Another thing I learned the hard way, I'm sure. But how do you decide where to start a tour? It really depends on what the goals are, and like how long you can be on tour, how far away it is, and how long you're going to be out, and how it relates to the other markets that you're planning to hit on that tour. So a lot of times when we start mapping out a tour, I actually kind of route it out with our agent weekend by weekend and region by region. And it's like, hey, we want to play Wednesday through Sunday, and we're going to start in the Northeast. So we want to hit 5 markets up there in any order. But if there's a specific market that we're really, really trying to push over the top, you try and play that market on a Friday or Saturday. And if you need to route something to get there, you basically say, all right, this is where we're starting. That's where we need to be by Friday. Where can we play in between? So, where to start a tour depends on a lot of variables, but those are some of the things that I think about when we're first getting a tour put together. Let's see, Devin Morrison. Been a long time, Devin. I think we haven't spoken today, but we've probably spoken every day since. A lot of musicians seem to have a negative view of music streaming in general and Spotify in particular. I know you have some opinions about that subject, and I've always been super interested in. Could you talk a little bit about that? I can talk all day about that. So what Devin is referring to is the phenomenon of a lot of artists saying streaming doesn't pay enough. Fuck streaming. Like, when the streaming phenomenon first happened, there was massive, massive, massive backlash from major artists. I remember Trent Reznor and Tom York, the Beatles, Taylor Swift. I mean, like massive, massive artists who are really objecting to the idea that their music was being devalued. And that's fair enough. But what a lot of people don't realize, and I mean, you realize it if you can like just take a step back and think about it, but the streaming phenomenon was born out of piracy. And sure, it's not really the same financial model as when you would go buy a CD for 15 or 20 bucks, and you know, a CD costs like $1 to manufacture, and even less than that if you're pressing tens of thousands of them. So there were absolutely astronomical profit margins in the heyday of CDs. And would it be great for that to be around still? Sure. Yeah, it would be awesome if people could still make that much money per unit. But the truth of the matter is that technology came around that allowed people to start sharing music for free, AKA stealing it, depending on who you're asking. And you can't put that genie back in the bottle. You know, once the technology was out there, you got to figure out how to adapt to it. And streaming is the answer. So is it fair when you compare it to the old model? I don't think that's really the right question to be asking. Is it better than having everybody pay you nothing for your music? Fuck yeah, it is. And you know, the truth of the matter is, if you think about a Spotify stream right now, it pays out like 0.0038 cents per stream or something. You know, imagine you bought a CD for 15 bucks and it had 10 songs on it. That's $1.50 per song. Not much more than you would pay for like an iTunes download. Let's say you listen to that CD 1,000 times. So each song that you paid $1.50 for, you listen to it 1,000 times. What's $1.50 divided by 1,000? It's like 0.0015. That's like kind of in the same ballpark as the 0.0038. It's less if you think about it like that. And the thing about streaming that a lot of people don't really grasp is that every single time you play a song on Spotify or Apple Music or YouTube or Deezer or Pandora or whatever Tidal, whatever service you listen to, every single time that song gets played, the artist actually gets paid. It's a fraction of a penny, but the thing is, the way those services work is the more a song gets played, the more it starts popping up in other, you know, suggested radio and playlists. It's algorithmic, the same as like Facebook's algorithm. You know, the more a post it gets liked, the more it shows up in your feed. Streaming works the same way by design. You know, it's built to help the cream rise to the top. So I could go on and on about streaming, but there are two documentaries that I strongly suggest everybody watch to really, really understand how we got from there to here. One is called All Things Must Pass. It's the Tower Records documentary. And the other one is called Downloaded. It's the Napster documentary. And I suggest watching them in that order. Watch the Tower documentary, then watch the Napster documentary. And I think you will start to see how streaming actually is the thing that has saved the music industry rather than the thing that has made it impossible for artists to make money. The reality is, if you are not making any money on streaming, it's because not enough people are listening to your music. And that's the real issue to work on. If not enough people are listening to your music, it's because they don't know about it, they don't know that you exist, or they don't care. So those are the things you've got to work on. Figure out who actually likes your music and figure out how to give them more of what they like. And when you give somebody something they like, they love you even more, and your fans become the network that tells their friends and tells their friends and tells their friends and streams you all the time, and it tickles the algorithms and you pop up in more suggested playlists. So really, artists who feel like streaming is not paying them enough, I would suggest consider the alternative, which is, not getting paid anything for it. And maybe think about ways that you can build your audience, and the streaming will come if the audience is there. So Devin, I know that I've rambled on enough about that. If anybody else would like to talk about that, I'm happy to keep going, but I'll move out. I'll move on for now. Let's see. Noel Attaway. Hey, Noel. Are you considering doing a drive-in festival? I've certainly considered it. I think it's really cool. Like, I would love to go to a drive-in event right now. If there was a drive-in theater in my area that was doing it, I would totally do it. And I would pay like good money to go have that experience, because I think it's unique. I think a drive-in festival, I mean, it's already happening. It's been happening in these other places I haven't had a chance to go to. I question the economic feasibility of it. When a festival is normally built on booking a bunch of bands, getting a bunch of vendors, making sure you've got food and beverage revenue, making sure you've got ticket revenue, making sure you've got sponsor revenue, because you're going to put a bunch of people in that spot, and that's what sponsors are looking to spend their money on. And when you're talking about having cars in a parking lot, there are dramatically fewer people you can fit in that space. And unless the ticket prices are like, way jacked up, it's hard to imagine being able to do it in a way that doesn't lose money. But I would love to be proven wrong. I would love to see it happen. I would love to just see what that experience is like and dive deeper into it. So to answer the question, I have considered doing a drive-in festival, but I'm nowhere near ready to try and pull it off. I need to ponder that a little bit more, but thank you for the question. It's worth considering some more for sure. Let's see. Greg Hannes. Greg, another person who's been hugely helpful in spreading the word about the Rootfire TV sessions. Greg was one of the first people who reached out and said, let us help. Huge thanks to you, Greg, for all your help. With Tiki Took group, I think you mean TikTok, group listening sessions on some sites and the other social media sites out there, what advice do you have for musicians to leverage social media? What do you see for the future with fan interaction online? I think artists need to be really careful about spam. One of the things that's a little bit of a pet peeve for me is when people join, the Facebook group for this band or that band or this band, and all they ever do in there is like post their own shit. The love you take is equal to the love you make. You really want to be giving to those groups more than you're taking. So I think artists need to be really careful about that. Not like it's not okay to promote something that you're doing, but you need to be doing more than just promoting your own thing on social media, because it's really about engagement more than it's about impressions. Sure, impressions are very important. And actually with TikTok in particular, that's kind of like the metric. It's about views. But with other social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, anybody who has any clue how social media works can pretty quickly spot when your followers are not real, when they're not engaged. And you can have a bajillion likes on Facebook, but when you post something, only 3 people interact with it. Well, that audience isn't really working. That audience isn't really there. They're not paying attention. So I think that the future of fan interaction online is, again, it's about figuring out who your community is and actively participating in your community. Give to it. Don't just sit there and spam your stuff and say me. Sit there and say you ? You know, what's going on with you? Here's what's going on with me. What do you think about this? It's really, you know, bottom line is that it's about engagement. And if you're not thinking of ways to engage with your audience, you're not really thinking about building your audience. And if you want to build your business, you got to build your audience. So, yeah, I think that would be my advice to musicians for leveraging social media is be thoughtful. Don't take the spam everybody approach because it just very quickly annoys people and people tune out. So try and have meaningful interaction. It takes time. It takes one conversation at a time. So yeah, there we go. Let's see. Can local bands overplay? Brett Coleman. I think I rambled on about that question a little bit earlier. Local bands certainly can overplay, but it's a fine line, and every band kind of needs to be able to read the landscape a little bit in real time, and you determine if you're overplaying based on how many people show up this time and the next time and that time and the next time. Seth Herman, sending you so much love, brother man, full of gratitude. Me too. Seth is one of those people who it's hard to overstate how much he's changed my life in a positive way. So thank you, Seth. Let's see. Claire Elizabeth, regarding on-tour media, i.e. photo and video crew, do you think it's more effective connecting directly with bands or working with a company? Are you seeing bands generally leaning one way or another? That's a good question. And I think probably connecting directly with the bands is the most valuable. Certainly there are companies out there who have built relationships with bands, and maybe they've got some work for you to be, you know, to join them for a shoot. I will say on tour media is, it's hugely valuable to bands, but a lot of bands don't have the money to pay a photographer or a videographer what they're used to getting for doing, you know, shoots at home or whatever. But, you know, that kind of goes back to just one of the basics about making a way for yourself in the music industry. You kind of have to be willing to prove your worth before the money comes, unfortunately. So do I think it's more effective to connect directly with bands or work with a company? It sort of depends. But I would say if you have an opportunity to connect directly with a band, absolutely do that. Great example. But I mean, basically every photographer I've ever worked with actually is somebody who I met, not because I had hired them per se, but because they showed up, took great photos and sent them to me. I was like, oh my God, this photographer's great. And, you know, they'll hit me up and say, hey, can I go see this band? You know, any chance I could get a photo pass? And it's like, fuck yeah, you take great photos and you're going to be there and like you're willing to do it and offer your services. Great. You might be the person who I think of next when I need to have a real photo shoot and get some press photos done. So yeah, connect with the bands for sure. But if there's a company, you know, there are a lot of great media companies out there who are really small operations. You know, I don't even know of any one company that has like even dozens of photographers and videographers who work with them full time. Really, it's really largely event based. So it'll be like, you know, Bulldog Media has their crew for Cali Roots, and there might be, you know, half a dozen people working all weekend, you know, scheduling the shoots. Sugar Shack, same thing. You know, they've got a crew for those big events, but it's pretty rare to find a company that can actually hire a photographer full time, unless they've done a great job of building relationships. So it all starts from there for sure, from building the relationships. Adam Gross, streaming is good. Yes. Ricky Spinelli, remember Napster? Hell yeah, I do. I actually didn't use Napster that much, but watch that documentary, download it. It's fascinating. Napster actually has kind of re-emerged as a niche streaming service. more or less the same technology that turned into iTunes. So Napster is definitely still in the game. Let's see, Evan Button, my man. Who are the first crew members a band should work towards getting? Manager, agent, merch person, sound lesson, tour manager, sound engineer. I think you probably mean. That's a great question. I don't think there's one answer. If a band can get a manager who knows what they're doing, and that's the first team member they've got, that's amazing. But really what's more likely is that you'll get a merch person who's probably a friend who's like down to come on the road and is a champion for your band anyway, and wants to be there to be supportive, wants to be a part of it, wants to hustle. If you can get a sound engineer, that tends to come a little bit later. But like sometimes you've got a sound engineer who is also your merch person, who is also your tour manager. I mean, most bands starting out really have, like, if you get any crew member, even for bigger bands, that crew member is likely going to be wearing many, many hats throughout the course of the day. And, but if, really, whether it's a front of house engineer or a merch person or a tour manager or an agent or a manager, what matters the most is that they want to work with you, because there ain't going to be any money there, probably, unless you happen to, be sitting on cash reserves that most musicians aren't. But really, rather than focusing on like, we need to get this person, have your antennas up for anybody who you trust, who is willing to hustle. And that person is probably resourceful enough to wear many, many hats and learn how to be a tour manager and a merch person at the same time, or learn how to do sound while they're tour managing and doing merch. And if they figure all that out, they might make a really good manager too, because they're the type of person who's really resourceful. So rather than focus on, we need this team member and then that team member and then that team member, think about anybody and everybody who you trust, who wants to work hard, because that person's passion will be invaluable over time. But to answer that question a little bit more generally, a lot of times if you can get a legitimate booking agent on your own and you don't have a manager already, they can probably help you find a manager. And if you get a manager before you get a booking agent, the first thing that manager ought to do is figure out how to get you a booking agent, because then you start having, a real team put in place that can start specializing. The booking agent can specialize on actually booking the tours, contracting them, getting, going and getting your holds, figuring out whether the route makes sense, negotiating the terms of the deal, figuring out what venue is the right venue for you to play at your level. If you've never played in a market and you're just getting started, it's not going to make sense to try and book a show at the 1,000 cap venue. Start at the 100 cap venue or something. So a booking agent can specialize on that and really, really help you grow. And a manager, if they work hard and they have any sort of instincts about how to grow and build the business, the manager will help you find an agent too. So let's see. The Magician 182 would be interested in hearing the business model of Rootfire, since you guys essentially loan money for free and let artists retain the rights to their music. Also, how do you go about sourcing new bands? Great question. How do we go about sourcing new bands? We have an artist submission form on the website at rootfire.net. If you haven't checked it out yet, please do. Please submit. But the other way is, we live and breathe in this scene, and we hear about bands from other people that we work with. Every once in a while, we'll see a band at a festival or something and be like, holy shit, I'd never heard of that band before. They're amazing. Now they're on your radar. Now I've heard of you. Now if I get an email from you, I'll be like, oh yeah, that's that band that crushed it at Arizona Roots or something. The business model of Rootfire is totally nonprofit. We exist on underwriting, and we are actively building out new funding platforms, actually. So one of the things, if you haven't done it already, there's a way to contribute to Rootfire on our website. And we're actually pretty deep in rolling out a platform that will allow people like you, like anybody who cares, who wants to support artists and support us supporting the artist, to become a monthly contributor or a one-time contributor. But the short answer to your question is we're a nonprofit business model. We exist on underwriting from private entities who believe in the same thing that we do, which is helping artists build independent and sustainable businesses. We have learned that if an artist can own their masters and not have to license it out to some other party because they need the cash up front, if an artist can retain the master ownership and the publishing of their music, that can turn into an incredible asset over time. So Rootfire's model through Rootfire Cooperative is basically helping artists be their own label, so they can control the music, they can control the revenue. And yeah, you know, we might be, anytime you're making, you're spending tens of thousands of dollars or even $1,000 or $100 on the success of a band or a project, there are a million other variables that you have no control over, like COVID. So you're always taking a risk. And what we do is think long and hard about which artists we think can really, really succeed if we give them a push. And we put up the resources. We help them project manage it. We pay the invoices for them, and we recoup from the distributor once the album comes, once the album is released. But then once we recoup it, we turn the distribution keys over to the artist. And that becomes a revenue stream that helps that artist's overhead forever. And Rootfire exists on support from people who understand the value of that and believe, just like I do, and like I assume you do, that the world is a much better place with music. And the more we can do to support artists continuing to make the art, the happier we'll be. So it's really about values and about finding people whose values are aligned with ours, and making sure that if they are going to support us financially, we are not taking that for granted and we're delivering. So that's a little bit about the business model. Let's see. Adam Gross, 4,000 streams is around $15. So same value as that CD. Totally. Greg Hannes. So if I have all 7 of my Alexa devices streaming all day, it's like a slot machine for the artist. Small slot machine, but still incremental. Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that we do. We stream our artists all day long. An important thing about streaming to know is, 1, the song has to play for 30 seconds for it to count, and 2, the volume has to be on. You might be able to like mute your computer if you can't have it on in the background, but like the Spotify or the Apple Music, the volume bar needs to be up in order for that stream to count. So some of you may have heard the Wolfpack Sleepify story. This is something that was huge in the music industry, 2014-ish. Sick funk band called Wolfpack out of LA basically learned how to game the system, and they released an album called Sleepify, and the entire album was like, 30-second to 1-minute songs of silence. And Spotify has like, there was a lawsuit and everything. They like changed their model so people couldn't do this after that. But Wolfpack figured out that loophole, got, like 400 or 500 of their friends and fans to play the album Sleepify on repeat. And this is an album of total silence. And they made like $20,000 or $30,000 from Spotify. Of course, Spotify didn't like that very much. They sued them. I don't remember exactly what happened or whether they won it or lost it. But Spotify changed their system. You know, that was somebody who figured out how to exploit a loophole, and that loophole has since been closed. And so that's why now the volume has to be up. The song has to play for at least 30 seconds to count. But yeah, if you've got 7 different devices, 7 different accounts specifically, and they're all streaming all day long, you are 7 people. You are essentially 7 people listening to that artist at the same time. And Spotify has actually, a couple of the streaming services are just unrolling these group community listening sessions where artists can actually rally right now they're doing it just regionally specific, so it doesn't quite work the way that we want it to, which is globally. But Spotify has created a way for artists to create basically a radio station where they're all listening to the same exact song at the same exact time. And if you've got 50 people listening, that's 50 fractions of a penny right there. And the next song plays and you got 50 more fractions of a penny. So it has an exponential effect. So yeah, stream it. If you've got multiple accounts, do it. Very often I have an Apple Music account and a Spotify account, and I very often have Apple Music playing in the background and Spotify playing at the same time, and just stream all day long. It helps. Let's see. Guess I'll stream Cat Roots Radio all day. Hell yeah. Tim Egan, once shows are able to happen again on any level, do you see things going back to pre-pandemic, or are there permanent changes you see developing? That's a tough question. I think that eventually we're going to experience shows more or less the same way that we're used to, in big crowds of people, in sweaty clubs. I think it's going to be a long time before consumer confidence is there, for an artist to really sort of sell tickets as consistently as they might have been used to. I think that we're going to see a lot more hand sanitizer. I think it's going to be less weird to see somebody wearing a mask. But I think that the feel of shows in the long run is going to go back to basically what it was before, because that's why we all go to live music. It's to have that live in-person experience with other human beings in a room. And as soon as the fear of spreading the disease becomes a thing of the past, whether that's when we have a vaccine or when, everybody collectively arrives at their own moment that they're ready to go hug their friends and be in a crowded room of people, I think we're going to go back to having shows be more or less the same experiences as we thought, perhaps with some enhancements. I think it's very likely that artists will live stream shows a lot more often. That's already been happening, particularly with festivals. Cali Roots has been doing that for a few years, live streaming all weekend during the event. So if you can't fly to California and pay for the ticket or whatever, you can at least still be part of it and enjoy it. And, the people who are streaming from home certainly want to be there. So I think we're going to see a lot more streaming, and I think in the long run, it will really help. It will help artists nurture their communities, which is what it all is really about. So good question. Thanks for that, Tim. Dave Halchak, what's up, dude? I miss you. Not sure if you've covered this yet, but with the release of Ways of the World, can you walk us through a brief description of what your goals were leading up to the release versus how you feel about the release now? Man, so the bar was set really high. The movement released Ways of the World in 2019, almost a year ago now. And their album before that, Golden, in 2016, was a phenomenal album. It was sort of a comeback album for them. It was their first time working with Danny Kalb, A-level producer who had worked with like Beck and Willie Nelson and Rilo Kiley and The Green and all sorts of other artists. Actually, we have a music business Q&A with Danny Kalb coming up on June 4th, actually. So if you're listening now and you know who Danny Kalb is. Well, now you know who he is. He's the producer who did Golden. He also did the Elovaters, Defy Gravity, the Greens, Hawaii 13, all that stuff. He's going to be doing one of these in a couple of weeks. I'm really excited. But getting back to your question, Dave, what were the goals? Make sure that the finished product is at least as good, if not better, as what they had done before. So the movement set the bar very high with Golden, and the big goal above all else was make sure we don't put out an album that is a dud comparatively. When it came to kind of more nuanced goals, I mean, we had all sorts of goals about, let's get it out on this date. Let's get it out. All right, let's get it out in time to go with this tour. All right, let's get it out in time. All right, we didn't quite make that. Let's get it out in time to promote it closer to the sun. Wasn't quite ready. As much as you want to release an album on a specific date, 6 months or a year from now, you know, it's a moving target, and there are some things you can't control. In the case of the movement, there were a lot of different people involved with the album, and you know, sometimes it took a while to like get the featured artist who was singing on this song or that song. It took them a while to finish their part, or every once in a while, you know, the part would be finished and then it would come back, and it would take a while to get it, you know, to get the mix where it was. Sometimes it just takes a while for the music to be finished, and I think every artist really can relate to the concept of paralysis by analysis, you know, which is where it's like, it's not, hold on, that cowbell could be a little bit higher, that I don't like that key part, I want to re-record it, and that's sort of the artist dilemma, and it's what makes artists the creative, unique, wonderful characters that we love, is that they get really, really focused on something, and you know, you've got to let it come to life naturally. So over the course of time, you know, from the time we really got like the majority of the tracking done, and then we started sending it out to the various artists that we were asking to do a guest feature track on it, you know, it took several months, and it gave the music time to sort of like sit and simmer a little bit more. And it certainly wasn't the plan to take, you know, a year and a half or whatever from getting the bulk of the recording done. But in hindsight, that was one of the things that I think sort of helped it become what it was. You know, there is paralysis by analysis is definitely a thing, but there's also something to be said for like stepping away from it for a few weeks, a month, whatever, and coming back with fresh ears, because you start hearing things that you didn't hear before. It's just like if you're proofreading your own essay, you're going to miss that typo because you've been looking at it, you know, you've been staring at it. It's the same with creating music. So the big goal with Ways of the World was put out a fucking banger. And I think the guy has knocked it out of the park. Obviously, getting into the nuts and bolts of it a little bit more, we really wanted to make sure that we were doing our diligence to make sure that like things like splits, songwriting splits, producer agreements, and all that stuff were really, really, really airtight, and that everybody, you know, was on the same page about what their contributions to the song were. So we didn't, you know, get ourselves in hot water if we released it, and then one of the parties who was involved was like, what the fuck? You know, we never agreed to that. Why did you release it? Why? Where's mine? You know, like, yeah, you have to be really, you have to do your homework. So the goal was make sure that we do it well and we do it right. And, you know, the fact that the band and Johnny put together such an amazing album really made my job easy, because it's like, this is so fucking good. Now I just got to make sure I cross the T's and dot the I's and think about the best way, the best time and place to release it, to make sure that fans are, they one, know about it, two, are super excited about it, and three, when it comes out, that they aren't disappointed. So a little bit of big picture and a little bit of nuts and bolts nerdy stuff. Let's see. I'm going out of order here a little bit. Robin Griffin, what's the best app to stream from for reggae? Man, there are so many good ones. Robin, I don't think there's one answer to that. What I will say is if you listen on YouTube or you listen on Spotify or you listen on Pandora or Apple Music or Tidal, whatever your preferred service is, get a premium account. Pay for a premium account. You know, it's anywhere from like $6.99 a month to $9.99 a month. And the reason is the vast majority of revenue that goes into artists' pockets from those streaming services comes from the premium accounts. You know, there's like an 80-20 rule. And I mentioned this in an interview not that long ago, but like the lion's share of money that goes into artists' pockets comes from that small 20-30% or so of people who actually pay for premium accounts. So whatever your preferred service, they all pay artists. So whichever one you like the most, get a premium account, know that it is going into artists' pockets, and the more you stream them, the better it is for them. I personally default to Spotify and Apple Music, but actually I've been paying a lot more attention to YouTube lately. So, but Spotify and Apple Music are the ones that I like the most. Let's see. Carolyn, people constantly ask me what's the best way to make the transition from being a fan to working behind the scenes. That is the question, you know, and I assume you've got an interesting answer to this too. I'd be curious what yours is. But, you know, it's about building a relationship. It's about finding some way to connect with the people that you want to work with and find some way to prove your value. And a lot of that is show up, have a positive attitude, show up again. You know, it's like Craig Pierce told me back in the day in New Zealand. Well, I just basically started showing up every day and working full time. And eventually, you know, he just made me a partner in the company. It's like, yeah, well, so if you are wanting to transition from being a fan to working behind the scenes, reach out. Think about something that you can do that would be helpful and do it, and make sure that when you do show up, you've got a positive attitude. And if you say you're going to do something, do your best to follow through with it and do it, because that helps, you know, people start to recognize that they can rely on you. And, you know, be outgoing, be creative, and be reliable. Let's see. Adam Gross, is there any new music coming out tomorrow/tonight that you want to plug? Man, the mother of all projects, the Cali Roots Rhythm is dropping at midnight Eastern tonight, 9 p.m. Pacific. This is, I imagine a lot of the people watching here are very familiar with the Cali Roots Rhythm already, but this has been a huge, huge undertaking. 21 different artists voicing their own version of music over an instrumental that Cali Buds wrote and produced with Johnny Cosmic. I think maybe 8 of them have been released every week up to now, and the final batch of 10 or so are coming out tonight at midnight. There's actually going to be a premiere on rootfire.net, on our SoundCloud page. There's a link to it on the website. But that's gonna be available right at midnight. Everybody check it out. Midnight, my time on the East Coast, 9 p.m. Eastern. Super stoked. This has been a really special project too. You know, it's really the Jamaican tradition of rhythms and multiple artists voicing their own version of it is something that's been really steeped in the culture of reggae music for a long time. And the fact that this is a project that incorporates old school artists and new school artists is really, it's very cool. I think everybody who works in the industry of reggae music would agree that there's an ongoing effort to bridge the gap between old school reggae and new school reggae. And sometimes it can be divisive. You know, you have purists on either side who somehow think that new reggae is like a bastardization of old reggae. And if it's not political and it's not sung by a Jamaican person, then it's not really reggae music. And I disagree with that. I think that really music itself is about speaking up and sharing your honest feelings. Sometimes those feelings are political, sometimes they're not. And there's a lot of division that can go on in a community sometimes. But the point of the matter is that we love music, and music makes us feel good. It makes us feel something that we want. And the Cali Roots Rhythm Project has really done a very cool thing in bringing artists from all of these various different corners of the world of reggae music and putting them together in a way where artists, you know, one release is supporting the one that came before it. The one that came after it is going to support that one. It's a really cool project. I'm super stoked for everybody to hear it. Big ups Adam for spearheading that too. Let's see. What new artists have an actual shot in the post-COVID industry? All sorts of new artists have an actual shot in the post-COVID industry. I will say that, you know, going back to that concept of Darwinism that we've been experiencing here, I think, unfortunately, the artists who have always had drive and hustle and are the ones that are most likely to come out of this stronger, and the ones who might maybe have struggled with organization and motivation and drive probably will continue to struggle with that post-COVID. But I think, will new artists have an actual shot in the post-COVID industry? Absolutely. And I actually believe that a lot of artists are going to come back stronger than ever, because right now, without touring, you got to put that energy into something. And a lot of artists are putting that into developing the other revenue streams of their business that maybe have been underdeveloped so far. Their merchandise business, their recordings business, that stuff, those are all real pillars of an artist's business. And no artist can really have a sustainable business without having each of those areas of the business operating and thriving. So the artists who are doing the deep work of sort of shoring up their infrastructure right now and figuring out how to maximize the other two legs of their business, which are the merchandise and the recordings, the artists who are figuring out how to strengthen those, when touring comes back, they're going to be that much stronger because their foundation will be that much stronger. So that's something we've been getting pretty nerdy on over here for the last couple of months, and it's been really fun. Man. Jackson Weatherby, what's up, man? And our upcoming, the Nostalgia EP. The Nostalgia is the song that came out last week. The Double Vision EP from the Elovaters is coming out May 29th, / 9 p.m. on 9 p.m. Pacific on May 28th. This is another project produced by Danny Kalb. If you guys are tuning in and don't know who the Elovaters are, go check them out. Absolutely phenomenal band I've had the pleasure of working with for the last couple of years. And I'm super, super stoked. The Double Vision EP comes out May 29th. So check it out. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Adam and Gray chiming in. Yes. Double Vision. Okay. Jared LaFosse Baker. Oh, dude. Jared LaFosse Baker, another huge champion who has been absolutely invaluable in helping us promote shows, helping artists promote shows up in his New England area and beyond. He started his own thing now called Wicked Cool Productions. I'm pretty sure, Jared, you've started working with the Reggae 360 crew as well. Huge, huge respect to you guys. You are hustling. You have been hustling for years, and I'm really excited to see you get more involved in the business and to work with you more as time comes. But your question, let's see. What do you think of offering donation incentives during live streams? Like for a certain amount of donation the viewer will get a free item of merch or maybe post live stream Q&A access. Absolutely. You know, you always want to find ways to be giving to your audience, and, you know, incentivizing them with free things never hurts. People love free shit. You want to be careful that you're not over-promising and under-delivering. You know, that's kind of like the classic Kickstarter struggle that a lot of artists have had over the years. Is like, all right, you know, if we get this much money, we're going to do this, this, and this, and this. And then, like, they realize that actually delivering on their promise, like, fuck, postage. I didn't realize that was going to cost $15 a package to mail. Shit, we can't afford it. So, you know, obviously do your math, make sure that what you're offering is something you can actually deliver on, but absolutely offering an incentive of some sort to like get people more excited is fucking cool. So absolutely do it. Just be thoughtful about what it is that you're doing and make sure that whatever you promise, you can follow through on. But fuck yeah, totally do that. Mark Daly, my man. Mark, you're one of those people that I would be seeing at Cali Roots. I'm sure I would have hugged you by now if Cali Roots were happening in Monterey. Huge love going out to you, man. What's your favorite up-and-coming band, perhaps unknown to most, any genre? Dude, I mean, I think I just live listening to bands. And up and coming is a relative term. You know, there is a band called the Polyrhythmics out of Seattle. They're not really up and coming, but they're not really in our scene either. Funk band, so fucking sick. There's another band who's like sort of has a foot in our scene, but isn't really reggae. And again, not up and coming, but I've just been listening over and over and over and over again, is the California Honey Drops. Love that band. And to be perfectly honest, the bands that I have the pleasure of working with, The Movement, The Elovaters, Giant Panda Gorilla Dub Squad, Steel Pulse, Four Piece Band. I mean, I love the music. I'm a legitimate fan. And I, like, a big nerd, and I can play their music over and over and over and over again. Let's see other bands. There are going to be more that pop up in my head, but those are some for starters. Let's see. All right. Let's see here. Cheeky's Lazoya. Love you, man. All right. So I'm just getting caught up here. Hot button issue, Reid. What was that? Oh, yeah, we were talking about politics a second ago. Yeah, hot button issue. You know, I'm going to talk just a little bit more about that, actually, because there was something that I saw that really made me think a lot last night. There's an organization called headcount.org. Their whole mission is to drive voter turnout. They reached out to me. It was the Movement's tour manager, Corey, actually, who connected me with them. They're an organization whose goal is to get more people involved. And that's something I really, really, really believe in, regardless of Republican, Democrat, whatever. I am personally really disenchanted with the division and how everything it somehow gets turned into a political thing where you're either on this side or you're on that side. I fucking hate that. And Headcount is an organization that is very, very specifically nonpartisan. I mean, it's like in their bylaws, they are not allowed to take a side. And their whole mission is to drive voter turnout so more people can have a voice. And they hit me up a couple days ago and said, hey, there are these deadlines for mail-in voting registration. if you would be willing to share them through the social media accounts that you have access to, we would appreciate that. I said, of course. I posted it, and despite our best intentions, people want to pick fights sometimes, and people want to turn things into a partisan political issue when they don't really need to be. And just to get specific with my opinion here, if you think mail-in voting is like contributing to fraud, check your source, because mail-in voting has been happening for years, like decades. Lots and lots and lots of people use mail-in voting, and it is sad that it has become a politicized thing. And I was just looking at the comments last night, and it's just like, fuck, man. This person's picking a fight with that person because it's sort of the nature of social media anyway. And I won't lie. I have always really encouraged the artists that I work with to speak up. If you've got a platform, use it, because not a lot of people have the luxury of a platform or the opportunity to have a platform to share something you truly believe in. And despite our best intentions, anything that is even remotely different than good vibes, somehow somebody's going to get pissed off about it, and somebody's going to pick a fight with somebody else. And for that reason, I think a lot of artists shy away or have intentionally not touched anything that's anything except for good vibes. And no disrespect to those artists, but and that's fine. If reggae music is just about good vibes to you, that's okay. But anytime somebody says you should stick to pop, or you should stick to music and stay out of politics, that's an incredibly nearsighted opinion. And I would challenge those people to listen to the lyrics of their favorite bands and consider whether reggae music in particular really is political. And if it's okay for it to be political, I believe that it is okay, because it's just the way it is. Look at Steel Pulse. That's a band that's been political since day one, and they aren't struggling to have people really embrace their message. They are leaders because they are not afraid to speak up. So I have always championed artists speaking up and using their platform if they believe strongly in something. And I will absolutely support an artist who wants to do that. I understand when artists don't want to, because they don't want to create division, and that's okay. But last night when I was seeing it was a headcount.org thing saying, hey, these are the deadlines in case you want to vote by mail and you haven't registered. Just a heads up, you got to do it before this date or you won't be able to participate. And it's all about participation. So when I saw those, one particular, chain of people commenting back and forth, and it just descends into garbage, it really is disheartening for me. And I actually laid in bed last night thinking like, fuck, man. That's why artists don't want to post political shit, because even if they're just speaking their truth in a non-combative way, somebody is going to see that on social media and need the attention of picking a fight. And it descends into garbage, and it just is what it is. But any artist who feels strongly about not taking a stand, that's fine. But any artist who does feel strongly about taking a stand, I support you. I want you to continue to do that. And whether I agree with you or not, as long as you're speaking your truth, more power to you. And be okay with people disagreeing with you, because disagreeing is healthy. As long as you're not being a fucking dick about it. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox and get back to the questions here. Tim Egan, Chally Tuna kills it every time. Yes, he does. Chances reggae hip hop collaborations will happen more and more in the future, or is it a Chally thing? Dude, I think the synergy between reggae and hip hop has been there since day one. Look at artists like Yellowman, King Yellowman, like one of the original founding fathers of modern reggae music. Yellowman's music was sampled in like old school NWA stuff back in the day, like I think 83 or something, NWA put out an album sampling Yellow Man. Bam 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 bidam bam bam. I mean, another old school reggae song that was sampled by Jay-Z. Like there's all sorts of synergy between reggae and hip hop. I'm a huge hip hop fan. When we found out that Charlie Tuna was down to feature on Breaking the Glass for the Movement, we all just like collectively shit ourselves. I remember buying that first J5 album, Quality Control, and I bought it on vinyl. It's actually sitting right over there. I love hip hop music. So anytime there's an opportunity for reggae and hip hop to merge, sign me up. I'm there, man. So to answer your question, definitely chances of reggae and hip hop collabs happening more and more. Let's see. Survival of the Hungriest. Yes, Juan Love. Absolutely. Love you, man. Tim Egan, can't wait to hear the Elovaters Giant Panda track. It's beautiful. I can't wait for you to hear it too. The Magician 182, what's your take on Eventbrite for ticketing services? Solid business? Yeah, short answer is yes. Eventbrite is a totally trustworthy and honorable and great service. They have taken a massive hit due to all the live events canceling. They've made huge cuts to their staff, unfortunately, in the music division. So the question of solid business, the model is good, but they are being hit very, very, very hard right now. I hope they can survive. I think that they probably will, but they've had to trim the fat a lot, unfortunately. But in general, Eventbrite is the service I've used by default. Anytime we're running fan club tickets where the artist is going to sell a small portion of tickets to their hardcore of hardcore fans. And I've had a great relationship working with Eventbrite, and I look forward to doing more business with them. That's not to take away from any of the other ticketing companies. Ticketmaster is obviously the king of ticketing companies. They're kind of like the original ticketing company. There's actually a great book. I think it's sitting on my shelf right now. Oh yeah, hold on. This book, Ticketmasters, The Rise of the Concert Industry and How the Public Got Scalped. This is the history of Ticketmaster. It's pretty thick and it takes a while to get into, but if you're a music nerd like me, read this book and know that after you get about 60 pages in, it'll start flowing, and it's fascinating. Anyway, I don't really have any beef with any of the ticketing services out there. They provide a real service, and it's not something that they just do at the flip of a switch. It's something they've built over time to make the user experience efficient. And Eventbrite, I love working with. Man, my lamp just fell over. Maybe it's telling me I've had one too many. This is my first one though. Anyway, was thinking about buying their stock. Hey, might be a good idea. As long as they make it through, it'll probably be really valuable. Dan Wheatman, my man, Black Seeds vocalist and percussionist. Dude, I miss you so much. I cannot wait to see you again and hug you. Dan Wheatman from the Black Seeds was such a huge part of my New Zealand experience. So warm, so welcoming, so fucking fun. I mean, we had some really, really, really fun times on a couple different continents, and I can't wait to see you again, man. I'm so glad you're here. Let's see. James Searle, love you, man. Giant Panda Gorilla Dub Squad bassist and singer. Let's see. Robin Griffin, what about private live stream with a band or band member and making money that way? I would pay to talk for 20 minutes to my favorite band. Absolutely. That's something that a lot of bands are starting to do. they were doing that already here and there, but now that they don't have the opportunity to go play shows, I think a lot more bands are doing that. So yeah, private live streams of the band. Robin, if there is a band that you are interested in doing that with, and you need some help connecting with them, I'm happy to help. Hit me up. Shoot an email to Reid, R-E-I-D, @rootfire.net. And I'm happy to try and help connect the dots if there's a specific band you're interested in doing that with. Dan Rankin, what do you look for when adding new artist bands to your roster? That is a great question. I don't do it very often. Wearing my manager hat, the last band that I started working with, that I started officially managing, was the Elovaters. And that was after 6-8 months maybe of working with them to get Defy Gravity released through Rootfire Cooperative. So things I look for when adding a new artist to my roster. Do I think I can help them grow? And do I think I can work with them efficiently? And do I think we can set goals and realistically achieve them? That's all assuming that I have like the bandwidth to like even think about it. Cause really a manager's relationship with the band really truly is like a marriage or a relationship with any life partner. There has to be trust. And when you're getting into a business relationship like this, you have to know that you can actually work with the person. Do you like them? Do you trust them? Do you respect them? Do you believe in them? All those things are really hard questions to answer in black and white terms. So I think realistically, it would be very unlikely for a band to contact me that I had never heard of before and say, "Hey, would you be our manager?" And for me to say yes if I don't know that band already and don't have some idea of who they are and what their trajectory is or what I could do to help them. So what do I look for when adding a new band to my roster? Again, it's, can I work with them? Do I think we can set goals that we can actually achieve? And do I love the music too? I mean, it's really hard to be passionate about something that isn't your taste, So Dano, I could actually go on and on and on about that too, but I'll move on. And we got to catch up, man. I hope we can talk on the phone or hang in person someday very soon. Let's see. One Love, I thought your first name was Searle up until the pod clash the other day, James. That's hilarious. Searle Jam. All right. Let's see. Oh, man, there are so many comments here that I haven't cut up on. All right. All right, guys. Well, I think we're probably approaching the end of the road here. If there are other questions, of course, I'm happy to keep going. But some things that I'll say just towards the end here. Oh, Greg Canis. All right, great question. Can you remind us the meaning of the Rootfire logo on your shirt? Yes, the Rootfire Cooperative Sankofa. So the Sankofa is a Ghanaian symbol. Oh man, if it were really easy, I would just post a Wikipedia link. But Sankofa is an ancient Ghanaian symbol. It's a bird moving forward, looking over its shoulder and carrying an egg. So it's a symbol that's been part of Rootfire's ethos and brand since the very beginning. This is thanks to Seth Herman. I didn't know about it until I started working with Rootfire. But, you know, the Sankofa in a lot of ways represents honoring the past while moving forward, which is something we feel really passionately about. It, you know, kind of goes back to what I was saying about the Cali Roots rhythm that Ineffable Records and Cali Roots have been putting together with all of these artists from the roots of Jamaican music, where reggae music started, and which, you know, if it weren't for starting in Jamaica and the originators of the music, who are very, very often underappreciated, we would not have the business that we do today. There would be no modern reggae bands without, you know, without the ones that came before them. So the Sankofa, which is on my shirt here, is a symbol borrowed from Ghanaian folklore. You can look it up, Sankofa. It's actually like a really fascinating Wikipedia rabbit hole. But that's what the shirt is. Thank you for asking, Greg. Let's see. Rick Scott, it would be really cool if you would talk about the Mass Manipulation album. Man, I was actually just listening to Mass Manipulation again today, and talking with David Hines a little bit about this video that he's working on. So Mass Manipulation, talking about, so I can talk about the business of it, and I can talk about the music itself. So I guess I'll bounce back and forth just a little bit here and there, but you know, Mass Manipulation is an album that was 15 years in the making. Steel Pulse, one of the most iconic reggae bands of all time. Unquestionably, one of the most inspirational bands around to artists who came after them. One of the most fiercely political bands in the history of reggae, I think. So Mass Manipulation as an album, I think the title, you know, says a lot in and of itself. It has been such an honor to work with Steel Pulse and get this album released to the world. It has been a very long road, much longer for the band actually than me. I got involved with the project towards the end of 2017, I think is when that conversation started. We initially were like anticipating to get the final mixes by like December 1st of 2017 and get it out by beginning of 2018 or something. As it goes, sometimes the music takes a long time to get over the finish line through nobody's fault necessarily. It just needs some more time in the oven, really. So the music itself went through many countless iterations. Literally, I mean, I think every song on the album, by the time I even got to it, had like 5, 6, 10 different versions. So definitely a labor of love is an understatement. David Hines and the rest of the Steel Pulse guys worked for years and years on it. David in particular is a total perfectionist. He's a creative genius. So, you know, he would stay up for days at a time thinking about this guitar sound and that shaker sound and whether or not this vocal take was the right one. You know, he really got as deep as any musician could ever get with any song they ever released. So, which is part of the reason that in my opinion, it's a total masterpiece and worthy of all the praise it has received. The process of actually releasing the album was long and wild. You know, there were many like late night, early morning, drop everything, let's have this conversation right now, because it's, you know, it's really it's a seminal album, you know, being one of the most iconic reggae bands in the world. The first album they've released in 15 years, they really cared. Not that any artist doesn't really care, but the stakes were very high for them. These guys aren't spring chickens, you know, they're in their 60s now. They're the amount of time they have left on Earth is numbered. So they wanted to make sure they put out something that was worthy of the time that they spent. absolute honor and a joy to work on. If you have not listened to Mass Manipulation, do yourself a favor and put that shit on right now. One of my favorite songs, No Satan Side, starts with this really, really cool 12-string guitar riff. It's got violins and all sorts of stuff. The first song on that album that really jumped out at me was Thank the Rebels, track number 4 on the album. I remember hearing that and being like, this is a banger. This is like stepping out type of massive, massive, massive tune. And I really wanted that to be the first single, but over the course of a bajillion conversations, we all decided that Stop You Coming and Come would be the first single. And also, I mean, a huge, huge song. You've got songs on there like Don't Shoot, which the band has been playing for several years live. I mean, talk about politics and music. Don't Shoot. I mean, it's about Black people being shot for being Black. I mean, it doesn't get any realer than that. Mass Manipulation is an album that I will always, always, always feel like one of the luckiest guys in the world to have been able to work on it. So I don't know if that's what you wanted to hear, but that's something. All right, y'all. Well, 2 hours and 6 minutes into it here. I am going to wrap it up here pretty soon. Oh, Luis, you just dropped a question right when I was getting ready to say bye. What's this going on? What's your opinion on artist live streams so often right now? I get that times are hard for making money for musicians, but is there a difference between doing that and watering the art down? Luis, dude, that is like such an important question for everybody to ask right now. And I can answer it from my own experiences. And the answer is it depends. So one of the things, when COVID first hit and we started doing Rootfire TV, it was like a hard pivot. I mean, I remember a conference call on a Friday, and we had been actually Gray O'Neill, my right-hand man, and I had been talking for a couple of weeks about how we had a feeling that Reggae Rise Up was probably going to have to get canceled because this was starting to look pretty ominous. We had a feeling that everybody and their mom was going to start streaming, which is why we jumped in as quickly as possible, because we wanted to be leaders rather than followers. And for the first few weeks, I was personally sitting at my computer, for like 4 and 5 streams a day on the phone with the artist, telling them how to log into YouTube and go live for the first time ever, how to schedule it ahead of time, learning as we went, refreshing the PayPal thing, getting in there, commenting in real time. And somewhere a couple weeks in, I found myself be like, man, I'm tired of this. I was just exhausted because we'd been doing it so much and we'd been working every day, late hours, early hours. But when I recognized that I was starting to get tired of it, that was my first indicator that maybe other people were going to start getting tired of it. And we had to start thinking about how to make it count. So I started thinking about live streaming in the same way that I think about overplaying a market, where if an artist is streaming every day, and actually we started seeing this with the donation amounts. We started seeing diminishing returns. And what I started thinking is that you might not need to wait a year between live streams, the same as you probably need to wait a year if you're touring and selling 1,000 or more tickets at a time. You probably need to wait a year or so until you come back again, so people aren't, haven't had their fill and they're hungry for another dose. But I started thinking of not overdoing live streams in the same way. Now, to play devil's advocate, there is also a really sound model of the residency. And it works live the same as it works streaming. G-Love has been streaming like all the time as sort of a residency. The Reese brothers have been streaming every Monday night since way before COVID hit. And the first stream we did with them was very successful. And the second one we did just the other night was also very successful. So some artists, the residency and like do it all the time model really works, but for some it really doesn't. And it's tough to say exactly what distinguishes the residency that works from the residency that doesn't. But I think it has a lot to do with the artist's unique connection with their audience. You know, if you've got 20 people tuning in, but they're tuning in every week, well, they love you and they want to support you. And that's great. And like those 20 people, if they're contributing $5 every time, well, they're probably paying your rent, and that's fucking awesome. And like, keep doing it. If it's working and you're not seeing diminishing returns, absolutely keep doing it. Everybody's just trying to get by right now. But if you're an artist who is not asking that question yourself, you should ask that question, because you need to be examining on a case-by-case basis whether it is right to do this thing that you think you should do. You know, that said, I don't think I don't have the answer necessarily. I think you got to, you know, the number of times you hit a home run is directly proportionate to the number of times you swing a bat. So try it out. If you start seeing diminishing returns, maybe you should think about not doing it as often. And what I've started thinking about with my artists in particular is, how do you make it unique? If your thing is that you're just going to have an open Q&A every Monday, whatever, you got to figure out over the course of a couple sessions if it makes sense to keep doing that. And if you're paying attention to the data and to the engagement, you will know whether or not it makes sense to keep doing that. The first live stream that I saw that I was lucky to be part of that really differentiated was Matt Goodwin from The Movement did a live stream on, and this was his idea, but he's like, I want it to be on meditation, microgreens, and the movement. Those are three things that he is uniquely positioned to talk about in depth. And he did. And it was really fucking cool. And it sticks out in my memory because it was unique. I've seen other artists do one specifically talking about their album. I think that's great. So think about whether you want to go with the residency model and do it until it doesn't make sense to do anymore. It's not like a residency in real life makes sense to do indefinitely for everybody. It's very rare for those things to go on for more than a couple of years. There comes a point in time where it doesn't make sense anymore. So pay attention to what the engagement is like. Pay attention to whether you're starting to see diminishing returns. If people are tuning out, you know, rethink whether you're doing it too often, but you got to just kind of try it and see what happens. G-Love is live right now. That's hilarious. Let's see. Alexia Johnson. By the way, Alexia, I remember seeing you tune in to a couple of these streams, and I know that you and I exchanged a couple of social media comments. Before I even read your question, I just want you to know that I'm really stoked that you are motivated and curious about the music industry. And I have no doubt that if you continue on the path that you are, you will find success. So let's see what your question is. What do you think is the biggest challenge that artists face when branding themselves and going from playing clubs with, say, 300-person capacity to a 2,000-person capacity venues? What does that transition look like? The road is long. I'll say that. The biggest challenge that artists face when branding themselves is figuring out what their brand is in the first place. I think that you've got to have your antennas up and you've got to recognize what feels natural to you Now, there are some exceptions to that, I think. Some people put on a character and they are very decidedly not themselves. They are a character, and that's a whole thing in and of itself. But I guess if you're going to play a character and play it well, it's got to come naturally to you to some degree. But I think when an artist is thinking about their brand, they really have to ask themselves the hard question of like, who are you? Who are you? Like, can you answer that question yourself without thinking about what anybody thinks about your answer? Journal it down, write it down so nobody else can see it, but really ask yourself, who am I? What are the things that I actually care about? What are the things that I actually like? Is there something that somebody's telling me to do that just feels really wrong? Like, recognize that, understand that, and don't go for it if it feels like it's not something you can embrace and be honestly real about. So I think that, the biggest challenge artists face is like figuring out who they actually are and what the best version of that is to share with the world. And again, like, you still got to be willing to put yourself out there and take some chances, even to answer that question a lot of times. So I think a lot of artists get really bogged down in trying to get something perfect. And, that's the paralysis by analysis thing. There are a lot of cliches out there, and I keep repeating that. But, another cliche is that perfect is the enemy of good. You can think yourself in circles, but until you actually just try something, you're never really going to know if it works. So a lot of artists, I think, struggle with that phenomenon of like thinking that they've got to have it perfectly before they do it. But the truth is, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody swings and misses sometimes. And it's the same as getting ahead in the business anywhere. Like, you got to just try it out, see if it worked. If it did, but it felt really bad doing it and you hated it, don't force yourself to do it. Sit there and go back to the drawing board. Think about what doesn't suck to be forced to do. And forced is the wrong word there, but I think the challenge is just figuring out who they are. And then, once you know who you are, then you can kind of start thinking about how to share that with the world in a way that's honest and genuine, and that can, again, if people like you and trust you, they want to be around you more. So then the second part of this question is going from playing clubs with, say, 300 person capacity to a 2,000 person capacity. What does that transition look like? It looks like a lot of sleepless nights. It looks like a lot of fucking gas stations. Looks like a lot of sketchy venues and nefarious characters that you meet along the way when you're on the road. There are some artists out there who have figured out how to blow the fuck up without really ever touring. That is extremely, extremely, extremely rare. So what does that transition look like for most artists? It looks like touring your fucking ass off. It looks like going to play, it looks like driving 3,000 miles to make $250. Honestly, like, it literally, like, so many bands lose so much money just getting established. So what does that transition look like? It's as unique as you and me. Every path is a little bit different, but the artists that I know who are really growing are grinding on the road. And how do you grind on the road? Well, first you start picking up and you call every bar in town. But you got to get other people talking about you. You have to inspire somebody else to say, that band is fucking sick, check them out. Or like, that singer-songwriter writes an amazing song. I love this song. You should listen to it. You got to find ways to connect with people that make them want to talk about you. Because the way, a couple weeks ago, we had Thomas Cousins, the president of Ineffable, answering a similar question, one of the things he pointed out, which really resonated with me, is like, if you as an artist hit me up and I've never heard about you, that's the first time I'm hearing about you. So, you're not necessarily on my radar because you reached out to me one time. But if I am having just a normal conversation with people that I work with and trust all the time, and they tell me about a band, well, they're sort of vouching for a band, or at least they're becoming a vehicle for that band to get on my radar. And if another person starts telling me about a band, well, there we go. And actually, that's how the Elovaters got on my radar. They had a friend who was helping them out some years ago. That friend started reaching out to me, just sending me stuff, just sending me, here's a new video. Here, hey, I see that Giant Panda is playing, in Buffalo. Could the Elovaters open for him? And it's like, well, we checked out the music. All right, yeah. I mean, there's not much money there, but if you guys want to, sure. And then I was in Charlottesville getting lunch with my friend Danny Kalb, the producer, and he was working on the Elovaters album. And Danny was the one who was like, dude, this album is great. You should check it out. And it just happened to be at a time that I was trying to figure out what the next Rootfire cooperative project was going to be. I checked it out. I liked what I heard. They had already been on my radar because other people had been telling me about them. And thus our relationship began. So that's just one example of like what that transition looks like. The road is long and very, very, very different for everybody. But the key ingredients that I've seen consistently among the bands that are succeeding and growing are that other people are excited about them and telling their friends, and they are willing to go out and grind on the road, make peanuts, because that's kind of what you got to do to get your foot in the door, whether it's on stage or in the industry itself. It sucks, but it's the reality, unfortunately. But yeah, that transition, it's a long and hard road. And if an artist is not dedicated and passionate and willing to be exhausted and leave their families for weeks or months at a time, it's going to be harder, because those are the ways you get in front of people. Those are the ways you start the conversation that somebody else is going to have about you. So anyway, there I go rambling again. Let's see. All right, guys. The Magician 182. One more question here. What's your favorite movement album and tracks? Sorry to put you on the spot. Mine got to be an album, Ways the World, then tracks number 1, Golden, then Ways the World, and No Wood. So this question, it depends on the day you ask me. The way that I find myself thinking about songs is like, oh, that was my first favorite song on the album. Oh, that was my first favorite song on that album. And I'm speaking from a perspective of having listened to the mixes in progress, and like, we'll get 5 mixes back and be like, ooh, that one I like. And then the next time we're like, ooh, that one, I didn't really pay attention to that one before, but now I like. So I'll say with Golden, with that album, my first favorite song on that album was Fair Warning. And I think probably the last song in that process to really finally click for me was Dance Hall. And again, like, to say that it was the last song that became my favorite is only to say that it took me longer to realize how much I loved that song. Every song on the album at some point was my favorite song of the moment. My favorite song on Ways of the World, dude, Orange Sky and Break in the Glass are probably like my favorite songs on that album. The Great Discovery was another song that very quickly I was just like, ooh, yeah. I tend to like kind of the darker, grittier stuff. That's what kind of like jumps out to me first. I'll tell you a song that took a while was Take Me to the Ocean. And that's actually like one of the most popular songs. That's probably the most popular song on the album at this point, maybe aside from Diamond. And both of those songs took a lot longer for me to come around to. I love them. but it's the darker stuff that tends to get me first. And yeah, I mean, but then No Wood, I mean, you're talking about some old school shit right there. My favorite song on that album is To the Moon and Back, probably, and Live as Shit. Those songs, I mean, those are songs that while I was still tour managing the band, I was like, you gotta play that song. You gotta bring that song back. You gotta play Moon and Back. You gotta play it. And, you know, it took forever before they were like, all right, we'll play it. And Live as Shit was the same way, man. That was a song that when I discovered that song, I was like, you guys, this is a fucking banger. Like, please, this song is so lit. Oh my God, I want to see it. Ooh, I see you in the back. Ooh, I mean, I was envisioning. And with Orange Sky, mark my words, there's going to be a fucking disco ball. I swear to God, there's going to be a part in the show where it drops, and right when it comes back, there's going to be just disco ball everywhere. I can't wait. I got to make it happen. I'm not sure how to do it just yet because we don't quite have the light set up yet, but mark my words, that's going to happen. I hope I didn't just ruin it for you. I think it'll be pretty fucking cool, even if you do know it's coming. All right. I'm going to cut myself off, you guys. The last things I'm going to say here, first and foremost, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for supporting Rootfire. It means the world to me that people like you are paying attention and care about artists and want to help us help the artists. My favorite quote of all time is Stevie Wonder, music is a world within itself. There are a couple of really easy things you can do to support artists. One thing I would say right now that might not occur to you, reach out and tell them how much their music means to you. Artists have down days, you know, and waking up to a message from a fan that says how much you enjoy their music can really start the day right. So if there's an artist whose music has touched you, reach out to them and let them know. It really, truly does go a long way. Second thing, stream. If you do not have a premium account with Spotify or Apple Music or Pandora or YouTube or whatever service that you listen to music on, please go get a premium account, pay the $6.99 or $9.99 a month or whatever, and stream the shit out of them, because the pennies, the fractions of pennies, they add up, and they add up to the type of money that can put food on an artist's table and then some if they really start adding up. So stream the shit out of the artists you love. Last thing, second to last thing, this is really, really easy too. You don't need an account. You just need a Gmail address. Go subscribe to your artist's YouTube channel. That's one way, especially for young up-and-coming bands. If an artist gets to 1,000 subscribers, they can turn on their ad revenue. They can start making money from their YouTube channel through banner ads on the bottom as soon as they get 1,000 subscribers. It's really easy. You don't need an account. Just go to your favorite artist's YouTube channel, click subscribe. There you go. Last but not least, if you love what we're doing, if you want to continue helping us help the artists, please consider contributing to Rootfire and contributing to any of the artists who are doing a live stream. Every penny counts. If it's $1, if it's $100, whatever. Go to rootfire.net. There's a place you can click the support button and be a contributor. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. And I'm excited to keep this conversation going with you and share some new music with you as soon as I've got it ready to share. So thanks again, everybody. Talk to you soon.